Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Wednesday, April 7th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 148 days, the game against Michigan in 234 days. One of the most interesting positional groups to watch this spring at Ohio State, to me at least, is the offensive line. The Buckeyes are absolutely loaded with talent, so there's not a question of, is there enough talent? The question now is, how are all those guys going to fit together? And there are a lot of possible answers. My guest today is someone who knows a little bit about playing offensive line for the Buckeyes. He is former OSU captain and All-American Kirk Barton. Kirk, first of all, you hear coaches talk about playing the best five guys, but how easy is it, when you have guys who are natural tackles, who have played tackle, to slide from tackle to guard? Is that, are those totally different skill sets, techniques, or is that something that guys can just kind of do?
I think it's a combination of height and athleticism that makes it possible. We had the best kid I've ever seen do it was Jack Newhart. He could play center, guard, and tackle with equal proficiency, which is very rare. But, if you have a kid like Pat Elflein or Jacoby Bourne who's shorter with short arms, putting him out at tackle isn't necessarily ideal. You kind of need him to be in the phone booth, so to speak. So it depends on the body type, the athleticism, the intelligence, and the ability to master the techniques, because they're two totally different positions. They're both, I think they're both hard to play. People always think guard's easier than tackle, but it just kind of depends on your skill set, because guard, everything happens faster, and it's not always easier to go against Aaron Donald or some great pass rushing three technique, because he has such a quick path to the quarterback, being right over your outside shoulder.
I mean, this has always been a philosophy of mine, and you can let me know if I'm crazy on this. If you're moving safeties to cornerbacks, that's not a great sign for you, the depth on your team. And on the other side of the ball, if you're moving guards out to tackle, that's probably not a real great sign for the depth on your team. Is that fair that, tackles are maybe more likely to be able to kick inside and be good guards than the other direction? Is that sort of a reasonable assessment?
Yeah, I think it is. I think generally you'd like to recruit all tackles, just because, if you teach a tackle to play guard and he can already play tackle, that's easier than teaching a guard to play tackle. It's because generally they're taller, longer arms. You got to get a little bit more aggressive, I guess you could say. It's tackle's not a passive position, but you're setting out in space versus guys. So, you have to be reserved with your aggression, because you don't want to be some guy that's punching out of his shoes, and then the guys are just too quick. They have too much finesse. They'll get right around you, and they'll get you up on your toes, and then you're going to get sacked. So it's definitely a different mentality. But I always like taking taller kids and making them into guards if possible. I mean, Alex Boone played in the NFL and he was 6'8" at guard. It's possible. Guys don't like to do it, but Paris Johnson this year, who is everyone's franchise left tackle, is playing guard this year because we have two great tackles. Thayer kind of unexpectedly came back because he got that extra year from COVID. So you gotta go after whatever spot's open, and I think PJ is going to be a great guard for us this year.
Well, and that was kind of be my next question, is the tackle positions. They feel like they're probably more or less set at this point. Thayer Munford is back for his fourth year as a starter on the left side. He's probably not going anywhere. Nick Petit-Frere was fantastic on the right side last year. He's probably not going anywhere. But then the inside spots are pretty much open. Harry Miller's a little bit limited this spring. He figures to be in line for a starting spot somewhere at one of the guard spots or center. Matt Jones is repping at center. He's getting a lot of praise right now for his play there. DeJuan Jones has been impressive at times that he's gotten to play in the last couple of years. Paris Johnson feels like he has to play somewhere. You can't keep him off the field again this year. So how do you sort that out? Do you just, find your best center and then pick out the other guy, the best of the other guys for guard? How do you sort of sort that out and who plays where?
I just think you see who's the most proficient in each spot. I go back to Thayer Munford's true sophomore year. People generally thought that Isaiah Prince was going to flip to left tackle, because he was the returning guy, fifth-year senior, and Thayer and a bunch of other guys are going to play right tackle. And then they show up to spring, and Isaiah, who had been a good right tackle, was struggling with the footwork on the left side, and Thayer, who played left tackle in high school, had struggled with the footwork on the right side. So they just flipped them, and they put Thayer as a true sophomore at left tackle for Haskins, who broke every passing record we've ever had that year, and it worked out. But some guys, it's easier for some guys to flip than others. Some guys they're not as fluid with it. Like I mentioned Jack Newhart was excellent, both hands, tackle and guard. He's kind of a rare bird, but it's just something that takes reps. I don't want to be too extreme, but it's like when a guy uh, loses a leg in a skiing accident and figures out how to ski with a rod for a leg. It's like you don't ever think you're going to do it, but if you do it enough, you can get good at it. It's like if you do enough left tackle sets, you can get good at it. It just takes a lot of muscle memory and a lot of reps, and that's something that guys just have to put in the work to do it. Like Jedrick Wills for the Browns played fantastic, and he was a right tackle at Bama his entire career, and then he flips over to the left side for the Browns and played great. So it's a lot of muscle memory and it's a lot of work. Like you mentioned, Jeff Schwartz saying wiping with the other hand. I like saying it's like shooting a free throw with your offhand. It's like if I'm right-handed and this is my guide hand and this is my push hand. If you flip them, it's going to feel weird for a while, but eventually you can do it if you just do it enough and get your muscle memory down to where you're not even thinking about it anymore.
Yeah, yours is probably better for saying in public. That's good. We'll use that. We'll go with shooting with your other hand instead.
Yeah.
Which one is trickier for a guy? Is moving from guard to tackle with some of the different responsibilities there and some of the maybe different techniques? Is that a trickier thing to shift positions or switch sides of the lines, go from left tackle to right tackle, or is that completely dependent on the player and just kind of their mentality and their physical abilities?
I think switching sides is harder. Offensive line is offensive line, but man, if you're used to having your left hand on the ground and then you go out to right tackle, like I've just seen left tackles that get flipped and all of a sudden they're helter skelter with their footwork, and it's weird. Because it happens in the NFL a good amount because they only dress 7 guys on game day. So, if a tackle goes out, then a guy has to swing over to the other side. Or, Trent Williams, who's the highest paid tackle in NFL history, when he was with the Redskins, I think it was 3 years ago, someone got hurt and he actually went into left guard, and he'd never played guard in his life, but the guy who came off the bench was better at tackle than he was at guard. And Trent Williams, who's like the most athletic tackle maybe to ever play, goes into guard, and he was in there banging and doing good, but it's just, he didn't look like the Hall of Famer that he is at left tackle, so I don't know. It depends on who it is and the circumstances around, like who can come into the game. Cause that's like, there's something that happens is like when the right tackle gets hurt, it's not always the backup right tackle that goes in. Sometimes it's, kick the left guard out to right tackle and bring in the left guard because the next guy up is a better left guard than he is a right tackle. So we always have like these little shuffling things in our head where it's like, well, if this guy gets hurt, who goes in? Is it freshman Taylor Decker, or is it Chase Ferris, who's a third-year guy playing guard, and we kick out Norwell to right tackle? We always had these little things in our head where it's like, okay, who's the next guy up? Truly based on each individual guy that could go down. So it's always a fun chess match, and it's a lot more fun now that they have a lot of good players as opposed to when I was there and we were a little bit thinner back in the day.
Yeah, some of those Bowman offensive line depth charts were always like, how can the left tackle be the backup at 4 other spots? I don't understand how that works.
Yeah, I had to make those rotations for Jim Bowman's offensive lines, man, and they were just painful because we couldn't hide enough guys. We had to hide 5 guys, and it's tough, man. Having a bunch of guys that can play and it doesn't just look like throw up on the field is wonderful. That's kind of where we're at right now with this offensive line group that we have.
So one of the spots where you saw that last year where there was, the backup, the starter at one spot was the backup at another spot, was Harry Miller was the starting left guard. He was also the backup center. So, and I think a lot of that had to do with some of the, additional responsibilities that a center has and the demands on the center. There's obviously the snap, and if you have watched Ohio State football, you have seen sometimes when the center snap is a problem, and that completely derails everything. But there's also line calls there. That's something I think people don't necessarily. The snap is a very obvious thing that everyone who's watching the game can see, but the line calls, like that's a pretty big part of it. And Josh Myers was real good at it the last few years, and that's another big demand for that position. So like, what makes a guy a good center? What do you look for in a center? It's the tackle, you said, like big, tall, long arms. What are you looking for in a center?
Stout, strong lower body, can anchor. Honestly, as weird and crude this is, when you're a center, man, you got to have the balls to make a call sometimes, and it's like, it's not as easy as always just pointing out the guy, the mic and we work up to there. A lot of it's in pass pro where you got to have the balls to turn the protection. And there was actually more responsibility under Tressel with his offense than there was under Urban and Ryan Day, because the center made the protection calls. In a lot of NFL teams, the quarterback will change it, and most NFL teams, college teams, like the quarterbacks don't want it now. But we had the center do it, which I loved it because if we saw a tell, Nick Mangold could turn the whole thing, and we could pick everything up. And he was awesome at it. Like he would. It's weird because you leave a defensive end free, but if he's a drop end, he's not coming anyway. So you could turn the whole protection, pick everything up, and we look like wizards, and Nick was amazing at that. And Doug Dash was really good at it too, but nobody was better than Nick. I mean, and he's kind of the prototype center for Ohio State just because of how smart he was, how strong he was. And he played a long time in the league and played great.
Yeah, I don't remember how many times he was all pro, but it was more than a couple. And he had quite a career. So yeah, in terms of centers, like he is pretty much the prototype. The thing that prompted this whole conversation that I thought I got to have Kirk on because I got to ask him this. Tony Gerdeman put together his projected starting 22 for this fall. He has Paris Johnson at right guard based on the fact that, he's been there at least some of the time this spring, like when we've seen practice, some of the clips that they've put out. My expectation was, all else being equal, he would be on the left side. You put him on the left side because you're figuring he's probably the starting left tackle next year. And, as we said, like flipping side to side, if you can stay on the left side, like great, you've got the same hand in the dirt and all that. And you don't have to, you don't have to do the shooting free throws thing next year with switching from right side to left side. So, all else being equal, if they are very happy with their choices at the other guard spot, would they be better keeping him on the side where he'll likely play next year? Or is that an indication that maybe they think he might play on the right side? Like, what do you read into that?
I think that they're cross-training guys right now and having him use both hands just so he can work in. Because the big missing piece is Harry. Harry's out for the spring with a shoulder injury, so you don't get to get him in there. Because, if Matt Jones, for some reason, is significantly better or more comfortable at left guard than he is at right guard, and Paris doesn't have as much of a drop off on the other side, then that might be the answer. You put Harry in the middle, Matt at the left, PJ at the right, and then that's your best five. So it really depends on how well guys can switch sides and who's at their, how do you get the maximum output from the three guys in the middle? Is it Matt at center and Harry at left guard and Paris at right guard, or is it, because if Harry doesn't get his stats under control, then he might be playing guard next year. So it's just. It's one of those things where people presumptively thought that Harry was going to be the center, but if his stats are like Rick Ankiel's fastballs, then you're going to be, putting Matt in there. Because you need consistent gun snaps in this offense because we're always in the gun. We're under center like 5, maybe 3% of the time, and it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. I was kind of surprised that Paris was playing right guard, but I've been there. There's some guys that they're better on the left side than the right side, and some guys are more ambidextrous than others. So you gotta figure that out, and now's the time to do it because you don't have a game on Saturday.
One thing you always hear from coaches and players is how important it is for an offensive line to gel and guys to be able to really work together. And you've played together with a guy for years, and you know what he's going to do even before he does it because you've seen this guy do the same thing and run through this situation with this guy before, and you've kind of and that makes you work better together. So, they obviously want to make sure they've got the best 5 guys and they've got the guys in the right spots and all of that. But how soon do they actually need to know who their 5 are, where their 5 are playing in order to let them start gelling together as a unit before the fall?
I think pretty quick. I mean, the sooner you can do it, the better, because guys will work together all summer. Obviously, by camp, you got to have a pretty good idea who's starting because you got to start building some chemistry and some cohesion. So, a lot of times going into camp, I never really guessed who my guard was going to be because I knew. I mean, I always basically knew it was going to be Mike Nee or TJ Downing or Ben Person or whoever. And there wasn't a lot of switching around, which is great because you don't want to have to get used to the styles of different guards. You want to get used to how a guy hits a guy, set him up on a double team. You want to get used to how a guy switches to twists. You want to take those live reps against the defense, with the guy that you're going to be playing with. You don't want to be rotating guys in and out because it's just, you can't build chemistry that way. So I think it's really important for guys to get going. And I'm honestly really excited to see PJ and Nick Petit-Frere because I think that's going to be a really good side. I mean, that's two 5-star tackles next to each other, super athletic guys that could really do some damage. And I'm excited to see those guys play next to each other. Like, really excited.
Yeah, and you could have a 5-star right tackle in Nick Petit-Frere, a 5-star right guard in Paris Johnson, a 5-star center if Harry Miller is there. Matt Jones, I believe, was the number 1 center in his class. He might have been a high 4-star instead of a 5-star. And then the left tackle, lowly 3-star Thayer Munford, who was only a 4-year starter at left tackle at Ohio State. That seems pretty good. And
hey, man, those Maslin kids, 2 Maslin kids that are both 4-year starters. But there were 3 stars. Thanks, Bill Green. Love you, buddy.
Yeah, this is shaping up to a pretty good Ohio State offensive line. And if you've watched football for a little while and you've noticed, hey, the teams that tend to be good in the trenches tend to be pretty good on the scoreboard as well. You know, when you have that kind of offensive line and you look at the defensive line and how people are talking about the defensive line right now, it's like, this might be a pretty good year in Ohio State. This might be a pretty fun fall for Ohio State fans. So what a fun place to enjoy all of that excitement at buckeyescoop.com. Boy, that wasn't a sentence at all. Speaking of transitions, yes, buckeyescoop.com. We have a fantastic team of insiders, including, yes, Kirk Barton, as well as so many of our other guys, recruiting analysts, insiders, all sorts of fantastic information. Nevada Buck just had another fantastic post with great info from inside spring practice that he dropped on Tuesday afternoon. That was great. And I mean, there's just so much stuff there. It's you can't possibly get bored. There we have between the front page and the Ask the Insiders board, there is more content than you could possibly ever consume. So make sure you check that out at buckeyescoop.com. Check out all of our great podcasts. You know where to find them. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. And finally, youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop. It's all there. You can subscribe. You can find our podcast there. All the interviews we do, all that stuff. We'll be talking to Ryan Day later on today. You can find that there and so much more. So you can find all that at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop and at BuckeyeScoop.com. And then on your podcast platform of choice, just search, you guessed it, Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.